My name is Dan Miller, and I never thought my life could turn upside down overnight. I was just a regular guy living in the suburbs of Chicago with my wife Emily and two kids, working as a manager for a small company, barbecuing on the weekends, fiddling with the lawnmower. That's what my everyday life looked like. That all changed the day my mother-in-law Margaret called us with some unexpected news. It turned out that some distant relative none of us had ever heard of had left her an old estate on the outskirts of town. "Dan, I just don't know what to do with this property," Margaret said over the phone. "It's a huge house, lots of land. I don't know the first thing about it." "Don't worry, Margaret," I said. "Let me help you figure it out. I have some experience in real estate management." And so the story began. The next day, Margaret and I went to look at the estate. When I saw the huge Victorian mansion in the green of the old trees, it took my breath away. "Wow! This house must be from the Civil War," I whistled. "What am I supposed to do with all this?" Margaret asked, confused. Looking at her puzzled face, I felt a strange thrill. The thought of us doing this project together thrilled me for some reason. "Okay, Dan, pull yourself together," I mentally reprimanded myself. After all, this is my wife's mother. "What on earth are you thinking?" "Let's take a look inside first," I suggested, "and then we'll decide where to start." Margaret nodded, and we entered the old mansion, unaware of the mysteries and challenges that lay ahead. Margaret and I spent the next few days exploring the mansion. We had to sort out the deeds to the property, assess the condition of the house, and find workers to make the necessary repairs. I immersed myself in these tasks, trying not to think about the strange feeling I had around my mother-in-law. One day, sorting out old papers in the study, we came across a secret drawer in the desk. There was a stack of letters dating back to the turn of the last century. "Look, Dan," Margaret excitedly handed me one of the letters. "I think it's a love letter." "Wow." I carefully took the yellowed envelope and began to read. "My dear Elizabeth, I can't tell you how much I long for you. Every day away from you is torture. Our love knows no bounds, even if the whole world is against us." "The previous owners of the estate must have had some secret relationship," I said, looking at Margaret in surprise. "These letters are like something out of a novel," she said thoughtfully. "I wonder how their story ended." We continued to look through the documents and found many more curious details. Old photographs, diary entries, all of it was gradually adding up to a picture of the past. As we worked, Margaret and I grew closer and closer, discussing finds over coffee, solving problems together. We seemed to understand each other perfectly. She and I have so much in common, I caught myself thinking as I furtively admired my mother-in-law. Margaret looked amazing for her age. Slim figure, expressive green eyes, easy smile. "Dan, are you listening to me?" Her voice brought me out of my reverie. "What do you think about making a guest suite here?" "Ah, yes, a great idea," I answered hastily. "I'll have to discuss it with the designer." Margaret nodded and went back to studying the papers. I couldn't help thinking how good she was. Work on the estate was in full swing. Margaret and I met almost every day, discussing the renovations, the layout of the rooms, and the selection of furniture and DGC decor. It became a kind of escape for me, a chance to get away from the routine of family life. It wasn't that I didn't love Emily. She was a wonderful wife and mother, but with Margaret, I felt a special connection, as if we understood each other without words. Our conversations became more and more personal. We shared memories from the past, our hopes and fears. I learned that Margaret had always dreamed of a writing career, but had sacrificed it for her family. "You know, you could be the hero of my novel," she once said, smiling slyly. "Courageous, determined, with a mysterious past." "Oh, I'm honored," I laughed, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. These moments of flirtation, the innocent touches, the meaningful glances exchanged, it was exhilarating, making me want more. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop. One evening, sitting up late with plans, we found ourselves inappropriately close to each other. Margaret's hand rested casually on my knee, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. "Dan," she whispered, looking me straight in the eye. I swallowed convulsively, fighting the temptation to kiss her right here, right now. It was crazy, but I desperately wanted to cross the line. Luckily, the phone rang, snapping us out of our daze. It was Emily calling, wondering when I was coming home. It was sobering, a reminder of the reality of being a husband and father. "I have to go," I mumbled, hurriedly gathering my papers. "Thanks for a productive evening." "Yes, of course," Margaret looked embarrassed. "I'll see you tomorrow." All the way home, I cursed myself for my weakness. How could I be such an idiot as to be infatuated with my own mother-in-law? But my heart, it seems, can't help itself. I spent the next few days carefully avoiding Margaret. I took on more travel-intensive tasks, citing family matters. I needed to take a break, to sort out myself and my feelings. But on Friday evening, as the housework came to an end, we had to meet. Margaret invited me to celebrate with a glass of wine. "To our success," she toasted, and our glasses clinked together. The wine was tart and strong, and my head was quickly buzzing. We were sitting on the sofa in the living room, and the atmosphere was becoming more and more intimate. "You know, I'm so grateful for your help," Margaret said, putting her hand over mine. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her touch sent a wave of heat through my body. I couldn't take my eyes off her lips, so tantalizingly open. The tension between us became almost palpable. "Dan," she whispered, and that was the last straw. I pulled Margaret to me and kissed her, passionately and greedily. She responded with equal fervor, burying her fingers in my hair. The whole world ceased to exist, leaving only our entwined bodies and the frantic pounding of our hearts. We came to our senses only when our clothes were half undone. Pulling away from each other, we looked at each other fearfully. The realization of what we'd done hit us like an icy shower. "God, what are we doing?" Margaret whispered, hurriedly cleaning herself up. I was breathing hard, feeling my insides twist with shame and regret. How could I have done this to Emily? Betray all our vows and promises? "Margaret, we can't. This is insane." I couldn't string words together into sentences. She nodded, clutching her eyes. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. We both knew we'd gone too far. "Let's just forget about it," she whispered in a broken voice. "Let's pretend it never happened." Easier said than done, I thought, but I said it out loud. "Yeah, you're right. We need to pull ourselves together, for the sake of our families." We awkwardly said goodbye, avoiding looking each other in the eye. That night, I lay awake for a long time, replaying the evening's events in my head. My life was going downhill, and I had no idea how to stop it. For the next few weeks, Margaret and I did our best to pretend that nothing had happened. We continued to work on the estate, but our meetings became shorter and more formal. Gone were the jokes, the private conversations, and the light flirting. It was as if we were back to the beginning of our relationship. I was absorbed in work and family matters, trying to put the thoughts of what had happened out of my mind. I helped Emily with chores, spent more time with the kids. But as soon as I was alone with myself, the unsolicited memories of that evening and the kiss with Margaret came flooding back. In public, my mother-in-law and I behaved in an emphatically polite and detached manner. No innuendo, no unnecessary contact. It was like two good friends working on a common project. "Are you and your mom okay?" Emily asked me the other day. "You've been avoiding each other lately." "What? No, why would you say that? I tried to keep my voice even. It's just less work, so we don't see each other as much." Emily snorted incredulously, but didn't say anything else. I couldn't help but wonder if she suspected something. Paranoid scenarios ran through my head. What if someone had seen Margaret and me that night? What if she'd spoken up? Both of us were clearly in a state of remorse. I noticed how Margaret had grown thin and gaunt, as if she had aged overnight. She hardly lifted her eyes when she spoke to me, and if she met my gaze, it was a look of guilt mixed with longing. But even that guilt couldn't drown out the longing I felt for her. As the weeks went by, the guilt and the wrongness of what was happening only grew stronger. I could no longer look into Emily's eyes without feeling ashamed and disgusted with myself. Every conversation we'd had, every kiss goodbye, it all seemed like hypocrisy of the highest order. At the same time, I was irresistibly drawn to Margaret. Her image haunted me in my dreams and in reality. I remembered the warmth of her hands, the softness of her lips, the sparkle of passion in her green eyes. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get our kiss and what followed out of my mind. One day, driving past Margaret's and my cafe, I couldn't take it anymore. I parked, grabbed 2 coffees, and called her asking to meet. "We need to talk," was all I could squeeze into the phone. 20 minutes later, we were sitting across from each other, hesitant to look up. There was a heavy pause, interrupted only by the sound of the street outside the window. "Dan, I'm sorry," Margaret whispered, crumpling her napkin in her hands. "I shouldn't have let it happen. What kind of mother am I? What kind of example am I setting for my daughter?" Tears rolled down her cheeks, and I instinctively covered her hand with mine. The touch was like an electrical circuit, and we both shuddered. "We need to stop this madness," I said, trying to keep my voice firm. "For the sake of our families, for Emily's sake." Margaret nodded, sobbing. We finished our coffee in silence and left without even saying goodbye. I knew I was doing the right thing, but my heart still clenched painfully. The next few days became an endless struggle with myself. I tried to keep myself busy with work, the kids, anything to keep my mind off Margaret. But as soon as I relaxed, the thought of her took over. I was angry with myself for this weakness. I'd talked myself into 1,000 reasons why we couldn't be together. Our families, our age difference, society's judgment, is it really worth it? But my heart didn't seem to care about any reasoning. It had been a month since our conversation in the CAF GC, but it hadn't gotten any easier. Margaret and I continued to work on the estate, trying to keep our tone businesslike, but the tension never went away. Every conversation we had, every casual glance, was filled with hidden meaning. Emily, of course, noticed that something was wrong with me. I became withdrawn, distracted, avoided her questions. Several times she tried to start a conversation about our relationship, but I just kept it to generalities. "Darling, I can see that something is eating you. My wife could not stand it once. Is it because of work? Or is it me? Us?" She made me feel even worse. It wasn't Emily's fault. It was my stupidity and inability to control myself. "No, honey," I tried to smile and hugged her. "I'm just tired from all the running around with the estate. I promise it'll get better soon." But it never did. Every day became a hypocritical spectacle. At home I pretended to be a loving husband and father, and when I met Margaret I could barely contain myself from embracing her. One day my mother-in-law came to visit, and the atmosphere at the family dinner was icy. I was nervous, Emily was obviously suspicious, and Margaret looked like she wanted to fall through the earth. After she left, my wife turned to me with her arms crossed over her chest. "Okay, Dan, enough of this crap. There's something going on between you and Mom, and it's not a work dispute. I want to know the truth." I froze, my ears ringing with excitement. As I frantically searched for an answer, I realized this was the moment of truth. I was either going to confess everything or I was going to lie again, burying our marriage forever. I sucked in a lot of air, preparing myself for the most difficult conversation of my life. Everything in me resisted confession, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Emily deserved the truth, no matter how bitter it was. "Darling, I have something to confess to you," I began, my mouth drying. "I'm afraid it's going to break your heart, but you have to know." As I told her everything about my feelings for Margaret, about our kiss and our secret meetings, Emily's face changed. Disbelief, hurt, anger, she seemed to have lived 100 emotions in a few minutes. "How could you, with my mother?" she whispered, choking back tears. "I thought we were okay. I thought you loved me." Every word she said hit me hard, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Better the bitter truth than the sweet lie. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, my head down. "I'm confused. I don't know how it happened, but I'll understand if you hate me." Emily was silent for a long time, crumpling the hem of her dress in her hands. When she spoke, her voice sounded unaccustomedly firm. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dan. You betrayed my trust, destroyed our family. I need time to realize that." She left for the bedroom, quietly closing the door behind her, and I was left standing in the middle of the kitchen, feeling my world crumble. What to do next? How do I look my children in the eye? Would I ever be able to redeem myself? The next few days were hell. Emily barely spoke to me, silently packing her things. The divorce decree, child custody, all of it was up for discussion. But right now, she was clearly not ready to talk. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, to us. Should I fight for my marriage or should I let Emily go? Let her start a new life? And what about my feelings for Margaret? Was I willing to risk everything for this relationship? There were no answers. The only thing ahead was the unknown and the pain I had caused my loved ones. Life had taught me a harsh lesson. You can't play with other people's fates with impunity. I don't know how this story will end. Will I repent and beg Emily for forgiveness? Will I choose Margaret? I'm at a loss myself. All I know is that no matter what happens, I will have to take responsibility for my decisions and actions. And the most important thing is to learn to be honest with myself. In the meantime, the only thing I can do is hope that someday I will be able to heal the wounds I have inflicted on the dearest people in my life, and pray that they find the strength to forgive me. This story is my redemption, a lesson from which I must learn the right lessons. Because as Oscar Wilde once said, experience is the name everyone gives to their mistakes, and I seem to have just had that invaluable experience. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.